how do you protect yourself and your family from cyber attacks?
The answer to can your home network be hacked is yes, it absolutely can. So embarrassing. But I fell for the travel alert where the traveler woke up in a bathtub full of ice and one of his kidneys was missing. And
My dad drilled that into me, like, don't use the same password.
the goal is to understand how much risk you're willing to accept.
Just do something. Doing nothing is no longer an option.
Welcome to the SafetyNet podcast. My name is Josh Lewis and I'm your host. And today, as always, we have Sean Artizone, who is the genius hacker brains and heart of the podcast. And today we're going to talk specifically about cyber attacks. So the overarching question I'm going to ask is, how do you protect yourself and your family from cyber attacks? So, Sean, let's start out with a basic, if people don't really, I honestly think this is something people don't understand very well. And so can you just define what is a cyber attack? That sounds like NSA, like crazy, like government stuff. What is a cyber attack?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's probably just easy to go grab a definition from an authority. So like NIST.gov, their definition is basically any kind of malicious activity that attempts to destroy information, disrupt, collect, deny, degrade system resources, or the actual information itself. So a cyber attack can be pretty much anything malicious that does something either to the system or the information that the systems are passing.
Okay, got it. So anything to corrupt it. So
collect it, disrupt it, deny it, degrade it, or just completely destroy it.
Got it. Okay. So how does this actually happen? How one, how does it happen? But what are hackers actually after?
Yeah, so if you watch any movie, it happens by hacker magic.
Right.
You see the adversary, and he's like, "Just give me a second," and then he's in. And every hacker in the world that knows what they're doing, any pen tester, they're like, "I call BS," because it doesn't happen that way. And very rare circumstances, it's really that trivial. The majority, the rest of the time, it is drudging, enumerating, hard work, grabbing intelligence about the target. It's a lot of work, a lot of recon, a lot of failure, find an attack vector. In that attack vector, you fail. Oh, you find something else. And so there's a lot of things that actually have to happen. But what specifically is going on is the attacker or attackers, they're targeting an enterprise, or in our case, individuals, right? So the families and users of internet connected things. And the purpose is to disrupt, disable, destroy, or maliciously control that computing environment or infrastructure so that they can gain some type of financial leverage, personal leverage, blackmail. It could be anything that they can do with the data, stop you from using the data, assume your identity, take your money, troll your ex. There's so many nefarious things that can be done, and the intent, really the imagination of man is so wicked. There's really no limit to what can be done. And now, with like the ChatGPT stuff, actually writing malware, when you just talk about the software, it's spitting out incredible malware for anybody. And so, yeah, this is just going to keep getting worse. So, but yeah, the point is to steal, disrupt, control, deny, prevent, reuse, resell, whatever the market for that data, information, whatever that is. That's the goal, is for them to either have it so they can sell it, use it in an exploitative manner, whatever. So,
Got it. Okay. Is there like a certain is there a kind of thing that's more prevalent in terms of what hackers would be after for your average Joe, your average family, not like a business or anything, but like normal people?
So I think I would call that low hanging fruit.
Okay.
And I would go after a target of opportunity in that case. If I'm looking for a family, I would try to, find something that I know this individual, if they have a vice, right? If they're looking at pornography, I could use some kind of pornographic exchange to get them to send illicit pictures. Now I take these pictures and I say, hey, I now have blackmail against you. Send me $50 a week for the rest of your life, or these are going to go all over your friends and family. So that it could be as dark as that. It could just be, cyberbullying. It could be, really, there is no limit to what the adversary is after, and what it just really comes down to what what the point of the attack is. Is it a specific targeted attack? Is it a nation state targeting U.S. infrastructure? Is it industrial sabotage, spies trying to take out a competitor in the marketplace? For families and things like that, it could just be to harass and troll. I mean, there's so many trolls out on the internet that just because they can, they take over baby monitors and they torment the parents while they're listening to it, or
Wow.
because people just don't understand the security implications of a lot of this technology they bring into their homes, and how to secure it properly. They just make themselves vulnerable. And script kiddies, which are basically people who don't really understand why the code works or who wrote the code or what the purpose of the code is for, they just find it and they launch it, and they just see what it is. They have no idea the consequences at the other end of, but they could be taking down critical life support systems. And
Wow.
so really it's just boredom. There's a hacking
Wow.
group that was in Europe, and I don't even want to glorify their name by saying it, but it was run by a 17-year-old criminal who, brilliant hacker, and used his skills for evil, but was making millions of dollars and doing all those just bad things. So it could be a
Got
number
it.
of reasons.
Wow. Okay. So, you know, all this sounds like crazy to me, right?
Mm,
That it's just like that there are so many. I think because most of what I think about when I think of hackers are either, yeah, like uh teenage kids like just breaking into a device just for fun or whatever,
mhm,
or it's either as like uh I guess low key as that, or like, yes, breaking into the government
mhm,
infrastructure or something. How likely, like, what's the actual likelihood that my home or whoever's listening to this,
mm,
our home network, our devices, what's the likelihood that it would actually be hacked? Because it could seem far-fetched to
mhm.
people.
Yeah. So the 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 answer to can your home network be hacked is yes, it absolutely can. It is possible. The likelihood of it happening, it just depends on the kind of habits that the consumers of that information and the consumers of the internet, the behaviors, the patterns of life, all those things, that will determine the likelihood. So if you have a person who is visiting pornographic websites, or visiting pirated content sites, or visiting free download sites, right? Everybody wants the latest and greatest software, but nobody wants to pay the licensing fee for it. So what are they going to do? They're going to go find, they're going to Google free Adobe, free this, free that, Photoshop, blah, blah, blah. You get what you pay for sometimes, and sometimes you pay more than you expected. And so
Mm,
when there's an attempt to circumvent or shortcut some of the things in place, and I'm all for the open source community. I believe software should be free and shared, so that everybody has access to the availability of the benefit of technology. Corporations and things like that put all these licensing and things like that on that stuff. And then they hide their source code. You don't know what they're
mm,
doing, especially if they hide their source code. But if you keep the code open so everybody can see it and vet it and critique it and say, oh, hey, did you realize, you have this flaw in your code?
mm,
This is an attack vector for, potentially threat actors. And so by having that free and open stuff, it reduces the amount of vulnerabilities because everybody's looking at it. And so the possibilities become increased by the behavior of the person. If the person is taking and doing higher risk surfing and consuming the internet, stuff that's out there, the likelihood just goes up exponentially. Especially places like the Pirate Bay and all what used to be like LimeWire and Napster, all those free things. Hackers know people love to go to those kind of sites and find free stuff, and they put them out there. The scammer sites that are out there, the Best Buy Geek Squad scams, the Target gift card scam, all the different scammers that are out there. They're just sitting on the internet, and if you're day-to-day use involves higher risk behavior, the likelihood goes up. And so absolutely, they can gain access through password guessing. If your router has a default password from the manufacturer, and they figure out based on your IP address that your router belongs to Spectrum or it belongs to one of the other ISPs out there, they can find a way into that backdoor if that stuff isn't secured properly. A lot of things moving to the cloud, social media platforms, all those things are not hosted in people's home servers, but a lot of people love to have access to like Plex movies on the go. So they stand up their own media server and they put an internet facing port out there, and somebody comes across that port, they start doing password guessing attacks, and now they're on your internal network. And if you don't know anything about network segmentation and VLANing and how to separate all your network pieces, if they get on one segment of your network, they're on the entire network across the board. And so, that's a very trivial way that hackers can get inside. So another way would be simply by just sending an email. You believe it's from Amazon, you believe it's from Bank of America, wherever you think it's from, you click that link and it sends out to a site that has browser hooks, and it injects those browser hooks. Now they don't have full control of your system at that point, but they have some kind of control that they can work with and either password grab or do some kind of man in the middle attack if they can, sit nearby and do some Wi-Fi evil twinning, things like that. So there's a number of different ways that they can get in, and the likelihood just really depends on the level of risk you as the user take.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, it's actually funny story. I literally just got an email today from what looked like from my bank, but I looked at it just looked a little off, and I looked at where it was coming from, and it's like, yeah, that's not even our bank's domain.
Nice.
Like,
That was
so
quite a
forget
phishing
that.
attack.
Yeah, right. So that was just like, oh, okay, here
Dust your
we go.
shoulder.
We're gonna talk about hacking today. Yes,
Yeah.
right. So okay. So what you're saying is it's not a black and white. You will be hacked. Like 70% of homes will be hacked, or there will be something like that. It really has to depend on your habits and what you are connecting to, essentially. Whether it's I mean, I don't know if you want to talk about this, but like we were at a coffee shop and you were just talking about the vulnerabilities there. And so whether it's going on Wi-Fi networks that are not secured, or depending on what kind of content you're viewing and the websites you're going to, the things you're downloading, those things are really what make you susceptible.
So that's from the user's perspective, right? So how many of us have gone into our modems and routers that we have purchased for ourselves, right? Not the ones that are managed by the internet service providers, but the ones that we said, I'm going to stick my own Netgear in here, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. Or you went and bought the Unify stuff, right? And you like, I want to have the Unify APs because that's, it's a little bit more managed and you like the high speedness of that. And so instead of following the manufacturer recommendations, you just don't patch because, every time I patch it breaks something and now my network's down and everybody's complaining because the internet is broken. And so you don't patch as much as an enterprise IT department would, right? They're patching their servers, they're patching their Windows desktops, they're patching their laptops, they're patching their mobile devices, their tablets, they're patching their routers, their switches, all of those things, all the access points. Anytime the manufacturer finds a vulnerability, and it's responsibly disclosed, and then the community then says, hey, we're going to disclose this to the world. The manufacturer then has to push out or create a patch to fix the vulnerability that was discovered, and then that patch then gets pushed out, and then everybody should update because a security vulnerability was discovered. If you're not patching your systems, your software and hardware systems, those introduce ridiculous amounts of vulnerability. And so there's a statistic, and I believe it's from InfoSec Institute. Yeah, InfoSec Institute says infrequent firmware updates leave 83% of home Wi-Fi routers vulnerable to attack. 83%. That's a lot of routers that are vulnerable to attack because nobody's updating their firmware on the router. And most people are like, update my firmware on the router? How would I even do that?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. So yeah, home network is naturally vulnerable. And then quoting from this article again, it's up to you, the end user, to keep an eye out for signs of suspicious activity and figure out what to do if your network is hacked. So, and that comes right on the tail end of the 83%. So it could be risky behavior, but it could be you're just not patching your systems. So it could be your fault. It could, technically they're both your fault, but if you don't know, you don't know.
Right.
If you've never heard, I've got to patch my router, how would you?
Yes. So it's like it's not just actively going to compromise sites, but it's also just neglect, like whether it's intentional or not. Like, yeah, I know a lot. Yeah, like lots of people just don't understand that, and so that
How
makes
many of us have seen that little red icon pop up on our iPhone and go, ugh, another update. I don't want to do this right now. Every time I do it, my phone changes or something different,
right.
And they just push it off and push it off and push it off and push it off.
Yes.
Or you're even using just old technology because you don't want to update your technology, right? So you still have, Windows 10 or, God forbid, Windows 8 or 7.
Windows 7.
Windows 7 is end of life, no support. They're not making patches for it. They're like, rip it out, don't use it anymore, get rid of it. It's so full of vulnerabilities. It's the new Windows XP from a vulnerability perspective. They just, but people don't realize your hardware and software need to be updated as frequently as you can afford. If a hardware refresh isn't in your budget, at least do the minimum software update. So keep current versions of software. You don't have to stay bleeding edge, right? Because the manufacturers of these things, they'll keep a handful of releases back supported, and they'll still write patches for it. But 5 to 7 years in a life cycle of software and hardware, that's pretty ancient. And you could be exposing yourself to a lot more risk in that, because of that. So
yeah, no, that's helpful, and kind of I'm curious about this piece. So, and this wasn't in the questions I sent you ahead of time, but like, are there specific words, just like as we're thinking about like being hacked, keeping things secure, are there words that would be helpful for just the regular individual, the regular mom and dad to know, just as they're trying to like wrap their mind around these things? Are there words that it's like, man, yeah, knowing this phrase is helpful, and here's what it means? Does that make sense?
I think so. So kind of from an industry jargon perspective, like if you understand patching, right?
Yep. So what's a patch? Let's talk about that.
Talking about patching. So me as a pen tester and the rest of the industry, right? Bug Bounty, HackerOne, these are programs that bring basically anybody that wants to come and do pen testing against all kinds of software, hardware, things like that. They reward bounties to pen testers, and you can go sign up at Bug Bounty, HackerOne, and they pay you a bounty to find vulnerabilities in their software before the bad guys do and exploit it. And so when a vulnerability is discovered, the person that's in the program will write a report and submit it to that company and say, this is how we found a vulnerability. Here's the steps to recreate it. The company will then take those steps to recreate it. And if they're able to recreate it and show that, oh yeah, wow, this is a security vulnerability, and we were able to follow these steps basically like a malicious actor could do, then they will find and write a patch, a software fix for that. So they'll adjust the code, they'll modify the code, they'll add a new block, they'll do whatever they have to do to close that security loophole in the software or whatever it is. And then they'll test it within their systems to make sure it doesn't break everything. And then what they'll do, the discoverer of the vulnerability will be credited with discovering the vulnerability. They'll get to name the patch or name the bug, whatever it is. They'll get a CVE assigned to it, and then the company that has now patched this will have time to start pushing out their patches to all of their like supported customers, paying customers that have some kind of support contract. They'll push it out to them. Then they'll make it publicly and generally available for anybody else that has it. But there's a responsible disclosure process that happens where I, the responsible pen tester hacker, find a bug, report it to the company who has paid or signed up for these bug bounties. Because if you do it without doing that and you're testing software on things, companies don't like that, and they could actually come after you legally and sue you for hacking their stuff without their permission. But if they're part of these bug bounties and these open bug bounties, there was a hack the Pentagon, hack the Air Force, hack the DoD, they invited people to come in and find all these vulnerabilities, report them responsibly. Don't tell the world, just tell us. Sure. We'll fix them. Right. Close the loopholes, close the security flaws, whatever it is, and then we'll let the public know responsibly so that we can close it all. Sometimes the hackers, the bad guys, do find the exploits and they are actively exploiting them in the wild, they call that, and those are 0 days. There's no known patch for this. The software is widely used throughout the world, and they're actively being exploited based on SOC reports, things that blue teams, and we can talk about blue teams, but analysts and people that are watching the network, watching the things happen, they'll start to see anomalous behavior. They'll start to see indicators of compromise, or IOCs they're called. They'll start to see those things, and then they're like, hey, we don't know what's going on here. This has never been, there's no patch for this, or we think we found something. Then they realize, oh, this is a 0 day, which means every bad guy hacker that has told somebody else about this is actively exploiting it on their servers and on their servers and on their servers. And so that's where 0 days and things like that. So patching is the process of taking a known vulnerability and correcting that code or the whatever it is to fix that known problem. So
gotcha. To stop the leak or whatever. Yeah. Right.
And a vulnerability isn't necessarily exploitable. Okay. There's a process. So when you go through the offensive security course, and I don't think they're doing this anymore, but you used to have to develop from a proof of concept. So you would take your POC and find a vulnerability, and then you would have to work your way through the stack to actually generate an exception. And you're modifying and using memory, all the different pieces in that the memory stack to try to create different exceptions, and you're trying to jump into what's called ESP. There's a whole bunch of technical stuff, but you take a proof of concept and actually develop it into a working exploit. So just because there's a vulnerability doesn't mean it's exploitable yet. And that's where, once the vulnerability is discovered, you want to try to have the pen testers that are part of the bug bounty programs and things like that close those vulnerabilities before they can be exploited. So
that makes sense. So just because it's a vulnerability doesn't mean it has been exploited or entered in, attacked by what did you call them?
Malicious actor.
Malicious. Yeah. Right. Okay. There's patches, there's vulnerabilities. What are some other things, especially, I'm even thinking about like, the you were talking about like on your iPhone, you get the system update or whatever, and in the notes it talks about different things. Like what are some other words that it'd be helpful if people knew what this was?
Yeah, so firmware would be another good one to know. And so, I mean, just Googling the definition of firmware, it is software that provides basic machine instructions that allow the hardware to function and communicate with other software running on a device. And so to break that down, the firmware is kind of embedded typically into hardware.
Okay.
And what it is just simple basic machine instructions, you following the same definition,
Right.
that it will allow that communication between other software applications. And so if a camera, like a webcam, right,
Yep.
you plug in your USB device, the computer has to know how to recognize this is a camera. The software, the web browser itself has to know how to convert and do the video stream portion pieces and all those different things. Because if the camera itself doesn't have the proper firmware, that the software, the browser, the USB device, all those different pieces, if it didn't have that firmware, the computer would look at this thing and go, I don't know what this is. I don't know how to talk to this. And so basically the ability for all of this kind of stuff to happen is what is embedded into pieces of technology that don't necessarily have like a web browser. Like you can go
Yep.
to your Firefox or your Chrome or your Edge and update your browser and your software gets updated. But firmware typically is associated with hardware that may be in a static environment, not always connected to some internet source where it can receive updates frequently, things like that. So firmware is that little piece of stuff that sits on the machine itself.
Got it. Okay.
Mhm.
Well, that makes sense. Firmware goes on hardware,
Mhm.
and that's what allows it to talk to the software, which may or may not even be on the device, but the firmware is always there.
Basically, yeah,
Okay,
low
got
level
it.
control. Yeah.
Okay. So, uh, what's the difference between, there's a term phishing.
Mm.
What's the difference between being hacked,
Ooh.
phishing?
Yeah.
Um, what is phishing in
Mhm.
terms of like the internet?
Yeah. So phishing is the target, the attack of the malicious attacker is sending emails out to, and it doesn't
Okay.
have to be a specific person. It could just be a specific domain. A lot of times, Microsoft, U.S. Bank, Fifth Third Bank, whatever the banks are, whatever the places, they know the domain ends with, AT&T.com, AT&T.net, BofA.com, whatever. And so they'll create a list, Bill, Susie, Mike, Joanna, George, right? And they'll send this list out, and basically they're just blasting everybody at this domain.com, this domain.gov, this domain.us. Phishing, sometimes they don't even know they are who's at the other end. They're just taking
Sure.
random guesses. And
Yep.
so just like fishing, I don't know what kind of fish I'm going to catch. I know a general idea that this lake has bass, this, it has bluegill, it has brim, it has crappie, whatever. I'm just going to throw the bait out and see if anybody bites. And so phishing is generally just a non-specific attack to see if anybody is going to open the email, read the email, click the links in the email, do those kinds of things. Phishing can lead to being hacked. Hacking could lead to phishing more people. And then a term which would be like spear phishing or whaling, once you have compromised an organization or families or whatever, a Gmail account or whatever, now you have access to an address book of known username, user email addresses or contacts. And now you can spearfish, specifically go after a single target or a group of single targets. Whaling kind of refers to going after like the CEO or the head honcho, like the big person in charge. And so those terms all kind of, nautical themed, but it all starts, phishing is just kind of a general term. So.
Got it. Okay. That's helpful.
Mm-hmm.
So we've talked about a number of different terms, and really there's not tons that families need to know, but we talked about some of the ones that maybe they'll see, maybe they'll hear
Mm-hmm.
about more commonly.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about, the likelihood of families, individuals being hacked, whether it's through negligence on updating their devices, their
Mm-hmm.
network, router, things like that, or the content they're actually going to, or the networks they're attaching themselves to.
Yeah.
So with all that, how do you protect yourself, right?
Mm,
Like other than click update, like what are some things that people, that families, parents should
mm,
actually start doing as I want to protect myself. I want to protect my family. What
mhm.
do I do?
Yeah. So some of the simplest things that you can do, you kind of already talked about, right? You got a suspicious email, and instead of just clicking on it, blindly, oh my gosh, I got to go to my bank because whatever, you examined it a little bit. You took a minute and looked at it. And my recommendation to everybody is don't click links that are in email. If you're not sure, copy them and paste them into Notepad, and then examine them in Notepad. If you're not sure if it's a 0 or an O, put an O next to what you think is a 0. And if the O looks different, right, you have a way to just check that against itself.
Mm.
If you don't have that time, just go to the domain yourself, like Amazon.com, type in Amazon.com. Don't click the
Mm.
link to take you to Amazon.com. I never click links in emails unless I know it has come from a trusted source. So, I don't think. Well, it's probably been a long time since I've fallen for one time a long time ago. I fell for a. Um, so embarrassing, but I fell for the travel alert where the traveler woke up in a bathtub full of ice and one of his kidneys was missing, and I immediately replied all and sent this spam worm email back through the entire organization, and everybody's like, "This is spam. Take me off your distribution list." I literally just hit reply all, so it wasn't even a distro list. So whoever
Right.
sent the original email. I was early on in my career. I was still just a phone guy. I didn't know anything about technology back then, but I knew what I had just done was terrible because the email server, just from that reply all, and everybody
Yeah.
then replying back, take me off your list, or don't reply all. As soon as everybody starts replying all, don't reply all. Yeah, anyway, it just destroys the server. So
Yep.
don't click on links in emails. Like that's the
Mm.
simplest thing you can do. Look at the link. Oh, it wants me to go to, youtube.com. I can type in youtube.com
Yeah.
myself and then search for the name. For your passwords, right? Everybody is afraid or, resistant, I'll say, to change.
Yeah.
And for a while now, two-factor authentication has been around. But
Yep.
more and more multi-factor authentication is becoming more commonplace. If you don't have multi-factor authentication, some kind of authenticator, Google Authenticator, Sophos Authenticator, YubiKeys, right? All these, there's so many kinds of secondary authentication methods where you can get a text message with a random PIN that's generated. The code can generate a PIN. So if you're not familiar with multi-factor authentication, try to learn a little bit about what multi-factor authentication is, because that removes the ability for me to just guess your password. Because once I guess your password, now I have some more hurdles, and the hurdles will be, did I clone your phone so that I can get that text message with that PIN? It's less likely, unless it's a nation state or some other kind of actor that has a little bit more sophisticated goals, typically. But home user might not experience that in their lifetime. If you don't have a password manager and you're using the same password for everything, that's a bad practice,
Right.
because once I guess your Gmail password, I now have your Amazon password, and I now have your bank password, and I now have your Facebook password, and I now
Yep.
have every other thing that you use that same password for. And so the only way to reduce the reusability and be able to remember long, complex passwords is with a password manager.
Mm.
So everybody, I'm sure, has heard about the recent breaches with the password managers that allow recovery of the password with a master key. The downside to recovery with a master key is if the good guys can do it, the bad guys can do it, and the bad guys prove they can do it, and they stole the master key and basically all of the passwords. And I'm not going to disparage the name of the company that was, but if you spend time and just look it up online yourself, you'll see who that company was that got a breach, and they were a very popular password manager. Password managers should have a one-way hash, and what a
Mm.
hash is essentially is it's just a mathematical equation that you can take the output of that hash and you cannot reverse it to find what word or phrase or combination of numbers, letters, and special characters generated that hash. All you can do is recreate the string of characters that generated the hash, and then match that. Do these hashes match based on this output? And so essentially to do that right now before quantum computing, it's a daunting task for a home computer. A nation state, depending on the complexity of your password and the number of characters in the password, the possibility to reproduce the hash can take months, right? And so using a password manager, I don't know all my passwords to all my stuff. All I know is that I have to log into my password manager with multi-factor authentication. And once I'm logged in and validated with my multi-factor, then I can just insert the password that I have no idea what it is to that social media site, to that bank site, to that whatever site. And so using those types of tools, the learning curve is a little high just to understand what they are. But some of the really good ones also give you disposable emails. And some people are like, why would I want a disposable email? Have you ever visited a site that says, click here to sign up, right?
Yep.
If you have a disposable email, you never have to give out your Gmail again. You never have to, if you're still using Yahoo. I hope you're not, but Yahoo got breached.
Oh, it did.
It did, yeah. And actually, they just settled massive class action lawsuit for their breach. I think they had 2 breaches.
Wow.
Yeah, but anyway, Yahoo platform. If you still have Yahoo, you never have to give that email out. If you have Proton Mail or any of the other ones, the web-based mail apps, you don't have to give those out if you have a disposable email. And a lot of companies used to not allow those throwaways because the hackers were using them to hide who they were. But now good people are using them, and they're allowing those domains to just be part of their average. So if that company gets breached, so like I have I will say like Sean-Bass Pro Shops. So I know where that email was used, who it was used for, and if now I'm all of a sudden getting spam to that email, it doesn't matter. I can delete it, and I know Bass Pro Shops got compromised because all I ever told was Bass Pro Shops, but now I'm getting a ton of other garbage emails. So either Bass Pro Shops sold my email, or their database was compromised, and whoever stole it is now spamming me. So there's a big benefit to using a password manager that has throwaway emails built in. IronVest is a really good one. It used to be DNT Blur, I believe is what it was called, but they've gone through a rebrand. But I know they use one-way hashing. So, yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think I said also learn how to spot a phishing attack. If you get emails that you're not sure of or whatever, don't click on anything. Keep your stuff updated. Keep it updated. Keep it updated. It's not a bad thing. Yet, at least.
Right.
If you're not familiar with encryption, basically, if you look up at the top of your browser session, you should see an HTTPS, right? S stands for secure, meaning the traffic going between your browser and that server is encrypted. And so a person sitting in between your transmission of those data packets, they can't read them. It's all just garbage. It's undecipherable. And so if you're not using, unfortunately, most web-facing servers now are all using HTTPS. I don't think there's anything that is any longer non-secured web traffic. As an enterprise leader or a best practice, I don't think anybody would allow their clients or customers to access an unsecured server. And so you yourself, if you're not using BitLocker or some other type of encryption on your computer itself, find a way to learn how to turn that on and secure that data that sits on your own computer. So if somebody were to come in and steal your laptop or rip out your hard drive or walk out of, the coffee shop with your device, they can't decrypt it. They can't read it. It just becomes useless to them. And that's what ransomware is all about, right? They encrypt your data and make you pay for the decryption key. So most of the encryption that they use is just industry standard encryption that's really unbreakable right now. Pre-quantum computing, the encryption is solid, and the only way to recover the data is either to pay or have them, mercifully give you the decryption key, which usually never happens. You just pay, and then they give you the decryption key. So if you encrypt everything, nobody can steal that data at rest. And most of the data in transit, which is like what we're doing right now, our data, my voice is moving across the web to you. That's data in transit. It's encrypted by the HTTPS. Data at rest is what's sitting on your hard drive, sitting on your detachable hard drive, sitting on all those devices. That stuff should be encrypted. So
got it.
those are just some basic things you can do.
That's helpful. Now, going back to the password manager, because I feel like I have this conversation with people all the time, and I'm like, you got to have a password manager. You got to have one. My dad drilled that into me, like, don't use the same password. Now, I've got kind of two questions. So I'm going to ask this first one. Is it okay, because I can imagine this being a thing, is it okay to use the same password for things you don't care about? Does that make sense?
I think I get what you're asking, right? So things that pose a low risk to you.
Yeah, like it's not attached to a credit card, like things like that.
I mean, so ultimately, when I'm working in the defense sector or I'm working for a private client, the goal is to understand how much risk you're willing to accept. And there's no way to get rid of 100% of risk. And so if you're willing to accept that level of risk by reusing the same password, because the threat is small, right? Maybe it's your library card, or maybe it's your, I don't know that the library would agree with me that you reuse the same password. But if it's a low risk thing and there's not really much, to it, you can, if you're willing to accept that risk. Now, one of the things about the hacking and all of that stuff, right? Especially if somebody's going after you personally or someone you know personally, they're building a database on you, right? And so just because they got into these things because you shared the same password across, that helps them build a bigger picture of you. And by building the bigger picture of you, they can actually ingest that information and put that into a tool that builds a profile on you. And now they have a profile on you, and they're able to generate better password guesses because maybe it's your Houday page, right? Or it's your old MySpace page, and you don't want to update your music, but you just got the same, you can't get rid of it because everybody loves Tom, and so whatever it is. But now they're able to just take one more piece of the you puzzle and put it together and make a bigger picture because maybe you use it across 6 different things. So if you're willing to accept that risk, do it, right? But if you're not willing to accept that risk, make a different password for everything. I could tell you there are a few things where I have reused a password, and my wife and I, we reuse one for trivial things. And when we know that it's something trivial, we're like, is it the usual? Yeah, it's the usual. And so we kind of have that conversation. But, you won't find that in our high risk, high danger. Every time I send her a randomly generated special character 25 number password, she's like, seriously? And I'm like, you don't have to remember it. Just use the password manager.
Right.
Yeah. But then like the password she has on the password manager is like password 1, 2, 3.
Right.
Like, no, you just, you put a ridiculous password on the password manager. Yeah. Secure your password manager. Use multi-factor authentication to prevent access to it. Yeah.
That's key. Okay. So there's that piece. And then, so the things I've been watching, whether I don't know if it's like been on Hulu or YouTube TV or whatever, I'm seeing a lot of ads recently for Google Chrome saving your password. Like they do amazing ads for this, but saving your passwords there, or like, I have a Mac, so like using iCloud to save passwords and things like that. Is that okay? Is that enough?
Yeah. So great question. And John Hammond, who is probably one of the greatest cyber experts I've ever had the privilege of watching his stuff and actually learning from him in some of the SANS challenges, the Try Hack Me challenges that he does every year. He puts on the Advent of Cyber. It's one of the greatest cyber training camps over the holiday season when everything kind of slows down and you're looking for something else to do, and the Advent of Cyber pops up and you get to run through all those things that he helps kind of create. He just published a video, and I reposted it on one of my socials, and literally it was stealing the decryption key from Chrome, and how trivial it was to steal the decryption key from Chrome using Python, I believe, to break open every password that was stored in Chrome. So there is the risk that it could happen, and he proved it. So what that would take, however, is a malicious actor gaining access to your computer and then to your browser and having the privileges of you on the browser, which then they would be able to replicate those steps. They could even probably do it. I didn't see the full video if he did it that way, where he went in as a low priv user and gained all the passwords from every other user. I think actually he did. I'll have to go back and watch that piece of it. But basically, yeah, that risk is there. So anytime you store your data somewhere else, like IronVest, what you want out of a password storage place essentially is, if you don't know the main password, you have limited guesses to get in, and if you cannot get in, the data is wiped and there is no recovery. And so what they'll do is they'll give you backup codes, and they'll say store these backup codes in a safe place, because if you lose your password and you don't know your backup code, we're not going to let you in. We're going to wipe all your passwords. And so that's the kind of password protection you want. You don't want a master key recovery system unless you're willing to accept that kind of risk. If you're willing to accept that kind of risk, get a master key recovery type password manager. But what you want is that data to be wiped if you don't know the actual password to get in. And so passwords like iCloud or Chrome browser, Chrome doesn't wipe it, right? Chrome stores it, and they have a master key,
So don't fall for those ads that I've been seeing people. All right, so last question. If people so we said don't use Chrome, don't use iCloud. What should people use? Can you give 3 different options for people to look at that you're like, yeah, these would be really good. These would be solid.
Yeah. So now I'm not saying don't use Chrome. I'm saying use Chrome if you're willing to accept that risk. Firefox stores your passwords, Edge stores your passwords, and they all pop up and say, do you want us to store your password?
Yeah.
If you're willing to accept that risk, you can use those. Just know that there is risk involved with that, and that your passwords can be compromised if you use those basic browser password storage mechanisms. So
good clarification.
I mentioned IronVest, who recently, I believe, within the last year, maybe 6 to 8 months, revamped their entire brand. So I like how they have a one-way password hashing solution. Bitwarden, NordPass, KeyPass, LastPass, those are all password managers that have some pretty significant popularity. Really what you're after in a password manager is, in my opinion, is a one-way, non-reversible, non-recoverable password manager. And I said it before, if you forget the main password and you don't have your backup codes, your passwords are lost to eternity. Right. That's how unrecoverable you want it. So it requires a little bit more responsibility for the person, the individual, because you have to maintain that backup code list or you lose all your passwords. And if you're, like me, you have thousands of them. But you also have a little bit more security because it can't be reversed. It can't be recovered. And so most browsers support the plugins of all of those password managers, and across Windows, Mac, and Android platforms. So the Ubuntu's and the Mac softwares and the Windows platforms all have those browser extensions available, so that while you're doing what you normally do day to day, it will pop up and say, do you want us to store this password, or do you want to enter the password now? And so they have all the support for those platforms, and you want one that has wide support and is part of a community that has access to the source code. They can see and point out any of the issues or see if there's any backdoors, right? You definitely don't want a software that has a backdoor into your password. The ones that got breached essentially had a backdoor, and it was that master unlock key. Once they had that, they could decrypt all the passwords in the vault. And so those present a little bit more risk. If you want a free one, there's some pretty good free ones out there. But again, you're going to get what you pay for. And if your password security is important to you, they make them very affordable. I think some of them you can pay, 20 to 30 bucks a year. And it's a small investment, but you get the ability to sync across all your devices. So it doesn't matter if you have your password manager on your iOS or your Android phone, if you have it on your Windows, desktop, whatever, you put the same solution and your passwords are synced across all those devices. And the investment, I think personally, is worth, the security that it brings. So.
That's great. Okay, that's helpful. I feel like there's a word you said that I feel like kind of keeps coming up as a theme for kind of what people need to be shooting for, honestly, and it's responsibility. Like what kind of like with anything, right? Our like technology has become this thing where it's like it can do great good, it can also do great harm. It stores things that are sometimes very personal, as much as like a password is to like or sometimes maybe a social security card or whatever it is. And so we have to treat these things responsibly, just like driving a car. You have to drive responsibly, right? Like there's just different things that we can't just accept and use technology flippantly. You're saying it is important that we learn these things. It is important. Like, I'm a homeowner now. I've been a homeowner for a few years, and just the amount of things that you can't just live in a place. You can't just like you have to take responsibility. You have to update things. You have to make sure it's all those things, and technology is no different. Whether we like it or not, that is the reality. And so, and you've given us a lot of great tools for that. So,
man, Josh, that's a great analogy. And really, the way you put that actually kind of just turned a light bulb on in my head that, that although I've thought about it, I never articulated it that way. And I'm glad that you said that because, imagine running your car and never changing the oil, never replacing your tires, never putting your wipers. And there are some people that do that and their driving experience is miserable. The homeowner that doesn't cut their grass and clean their gutters and replace the roof when it needs to and keep the paint going and, all of the important pieces of that. Using the internet is just that critical, right? You have to maintain the technology, you have to maintain the software, all of the pieces and parts of that. It's just as important to be that responsible. I mean, like almost like there should be a driver's license or something to use the internet.
Yeah,
maybe that would solve a lot of the problems, right? You got to put your. I'm not more Big Brother, but
dude, maybe that's something you should work on as a instead of a driver's ed course, we have
an internet ed.
Something like that.
Like that. Man, they just gave me some ideas for our ArkCybr.
I love
stuff.
it.
We'll have to talk about
I love it.
Yeah,
great. Cool. Well, Sean, this has been super helpful, and everybody who's listening, thanks for sticking with us this far. I know that a lot of this is just hard, right? Like Sean has been in this world for a long time, and so a lot of this stuff is just like second nature to him. But again, it is important that we learn these things and are aware of these things. And again, if you want Sean to help you, if you want ArkCybr to help you, this is the SafetyNet podcast by ArkCybr. And so if you would like help securing your devices from malicious things on the internet, be it pornography, be it hackers, things like that, ArkCybr is here to help, and it is free. But because it's free, we also need people to come alongside and help pay it forward. And so this podcast, ArkCybr, all the families that helps is crowdfunded by people like you. And so we would just ask that if you love what's going on here at the podcast, if you like what you are seeing on our arkcyber.com and the services that Sean provides, would you please consider paying it forward? You just click the link in the description and it will take you to the Pay It Forward page. Yeah, and be following us on all the social media platforms. We're on most of them at ArkCybr, and so we'll be posting content like this there. But thank you for listening. Thank you for being a part of this, and we hope that you will have a safer internet experience because of content like this.
Just do something. Doing nothing is no longer an option.